my presentations are a little bit different than some. You know, I don't just ramble on for an hour and a half. I try to, but that gets a little bit dry after a while. So it would be great to have a little bit of audience participation in it. So questions, comments, you know, concerns, anything like that, feel free to speak up. Matter of fact, everybody would probably appreciate it. I've noticed that we have a tendency to try to keep everything so close to the hip, which I get, but it doesn't necessarily benefit the industry much. And that's kind of, you know, one of the reasons that we're here, I hope, is to do that. And play golf. Did anybody play golf yesterday? No? Maybe we're not here to play golf. There were a lot of people out there playing golf yesterday, I'm going to tell you. So reducing service costs by bringing imaging service in-house. So let's look at the audience for just a second. So in-house, are there any OEMs in here? You can. One, third-party providers, ISOs, some 5, 6, 10, and then in-house, right? Those are basically our three groups of people, generally speaking. Whatever part of the industry you're in, you probably fit into one of those three groups. Is that fair to say? All right. So what we're talking about is we're going to talk about, let me see if this works, reducing the cost a little bit to do that. So the presentation said facilities are more than ever looking for ways to reduce service costs, produce higher profits. A good way to start is to begin servicing imaging equipment or expand your current capabilities. Well, there's a lot of money in this area, which is why there's 40 people or whatever there is in this class. There's a lot of money in this area, and there's a lot of cost savings that can be had, right? And it's generally speaking a profit center for you. Is that fair to say? For your hospital or your facility? What about, in a little bit. All right, so a good way to start is to bring this in-house. We're going to answer a few questions that inevitably come up when you're tasked with taking on imaging service. So what modalities will give the biggest bang for the buck? You know, that's a question that we'll try to answer in here. I mean, really it's something that you have to answer after you do some analyzation of, or analyze what you have going on. Is training available, and how good is it is another question that comes up a lot. And that can be whether you're using your own in-house people to do it, or if you're bringing an ISO in. You're going to see there's some tiers that we're going to go through, and each one of those, I think, or feel like saves you a little bit. There's a cost reduction in each one of those, depending on which house you're in. Who and what support is available when needed? And the support that we're going to talk about comes from a lot of different places. I mean, you have a buddy you call when you have a problem with a CT, right? Or you have a friend at the vendor, or you need a quick contact with a third-party group that can get there right now. You know, and you're not under contract with them because let's say you wanted to bring this in-house. You still need their support. So is there anybody that has no OEM contracts in here? None. Exactly. You're always going to need that kind of support to some degree. I say always. You should never say never and always, but regularly you're going to need some kind of support there. Is that fair to say? So the idea is not to burn any of those bridges either, right? There's always some level of support that's needed with the OEM, or at least that's what we've come to find out. So answering some of these questions before you move forward is going to help you ensure that you can do this successfully. Or if you're already doing it, selecting the next modality, selecting the next manufacturer. Many times we're doing, if you know you want to bring CT service in-house, if you've already determined that you're bringing something in-house, you know, which modality is it going to be, or which manufacturer is it going to be, what kind of support, what kind of training, all of those types of things. So the term in-house, I use the term in-house up here on the slide, but truthfully, in-house is basically the same for the OEM, the independent service organization, and the in-house groups. What we're talking about is performing the service, or what I'm talking about here is performing the service yourself. So if Block Imaging is providing the service, they're going to be, and they're actually doing the work themselves, it's probably going to be their least expensive alternative on something they've already determined they were bringing in-house. Understand that. I'm not saying on everything that they cover. Does that kind of make sense? So if you're if you're the manufacturer, and we had a couple manufacturers in here, if you're the manufacturer and you're relying on another OEM to provide the support for you, generally speaking, that's your most expensive alternative. Is that fair to say, do you think? Or, I mean, do you think, would you agree with me if you're that it goes in this order from the OEM to the independent service organization to the in-house as far as a reduction of cost? Yeah? I mean, that's what we've pretty much determined. So in-house, if you're the OEM, in-house would mean if you're currently using another manufacturer, if your multi-vendor group is using another manufacturer, then perhaps there's a third-party provider or an independent service organization out there that can provide that service for you at a better rate or a better cost. And it's not always price. Does everybody agree with that too? It's not always price that makes a service better? Or is that not true? It depends, right? Right? You might pay a little more if you're going to get a really quick response time. I don't know. Something you got to determine. And then the last one is in-house for the OEM. It's if they're using their own people to provide the service, then that's going to be their best efficiency. That's what everybody wants to do. So if you're an independent service organization, and it kind of goes down the same thing, you know, using the OEM, you have a contract with a hospital group and you're using the OEM to service the Toshiba CTs because you're really good at GE CT, you know, that's an expensive option for you. You would be looking to bring that down this ladder somewhere. I think I have oh yeah. Oh, look at that. What that does is, for me, is it tells me I shake more than I did. So the older I get, the more I shake. So I can tell I'm getting older. So the independent service organization is going to be a less expensive alternative for you. And then just move that on down the ladder to using the in-house. All right? In-house being your own people. Now, to use your own people, you're going to have to consider things like getting them trained, right? Is there training available? Is there parts supplies available? And all of that kind of thing. That's going to lead us into a discussion a little more about contracts, right? To move down this chain to bring things in-house doesn't necessarily mean that you bring everything in-house right now, you know, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. You'll have a plan to get there. It doesn't have to happen overnight, although sometimes people do that. And then if you're in-house, it's the same thing. It's if you're using the OEM, that's probably your... I will say this, though, recently, as recently as last night, actually. Did you all get in last night or today? Anybody go to the dinner last night? Anybody else? No? I got to come up with some better questions. I was talking to somebody at the dinner last night that is using the OEM to service some of their equipment because they feel like they're getting the best bang for the buck. So it is fair to say that it has been a little challenging lately in certain situations where the OEM comes in and they're really willing to get down and play, right? And they really are the big boys in the house. Is that right? They're the big dog in the house if they really want it. So independent service organizations next, and then of course they're most effective, or not most effective, most cost effective, is if they can do it in-house. And just a caveat there, when we say cost effective, that means that everything else that goes with that is in line too, right? Some people bring something in-house just because they're bound and determined to do it, and it may not be the best solution. All right? Any questions? Shh. All right, cost of service comparison. So these percentages up here, so for the OEM to service your equipment, about 10 to 14% of cost. The independent service organization, about 8%, and your own team, 4 to 6%. Now, this statistic was taken from Radiology Business Review. Does anybody know what that magazine is? Has anybody ever read it? They put out some pretty good information. No? No? Okay, well, this is free. You get that? There you go.
I haven't read that one, but those numbers are exactly the same for the whole HDM industry.
Yeah.
So it's not just imaging, those prices are about the same everywhere.
All the way across? Okay. That's interesting because when I looked at these numbers and I read this, I thought, like 15 years ago, we used to do this capital asset management class, this CAM class, right? And when we did that, we used almost the same numbers, like the same percentages of cost. And I was thinking to myself, 15 years later, you would think this would have changed more. So has anybody been around 15, 20 years in this industry? Do these numbers look familiar to you from back then? Or
Similar. Usually, big iron OEM price makes sense. I've seen that typical. And ironically, on the bottom side of the house, your Mickey Mouse podunk equipment is usually a higher cost of service ratio, just because the time you have to put into the darn thing versus the actual value of the asset. It's reversed.
okay, that's fair.
And then the bigger ticket bottom items are lower cost.
So the bigger ticket items we're finding it to be more accurate, the lower ticket items less, which kind of makes sense because you have 1,000 of something, you have to have somebody that tracks them down, and the full cost of ownership, right, or service becomes higher on that. That makes sense. So 15 years later, and you're still looking at the same numbers. I really expected that it would have changed somehow, but I guess it has something to do with the equipment getting more expensive, right? And I don't know. I mean, maybe these, so that being true, that means that these efficiencies really haven't changed much over all that time, right? The ratios of all of this are still staying the same. That's pretty interesting.
And one comment on that? Yeah. If the OEM thinks you have no option, they will price their costs accordingly.
Fair enough. Right? If they think you have no option, which is why a number of you are here at these conferences, right? To find out what the options are. Yeah, and that's true in a lot of cases. I mean, if somebody specific thinks that you're kind of bent over a barrel, they're going to take you for what they can get. It's not only this industry, as I'm sure you're all aware. It's everywhere. All right, so our percentages hold true. So having said that, moving up this chain here would be what our goal is, right? That's going to increase our profitability moving up that chain, lowering that cost of service. So that's what we're talking about. Let's see. Industry challenge. Doing more with less. Does anybody sit down in a meeting today and they say, we want to give you more money and we want to give you less things to do? Does anybody have that problem? Because I never have that problem. It's always we would like to, they're always being asked to do more with less. So if that means scan more patients, that means that in order to scan more patients, if they're being efficient with the equipment, we need to have better uptime to move it to the service side of this, right? And having better uptime could mean having quicker response time. You see where I'm going with this? So the point that I try to make in this conversation or in this presentation is that it all kind of seems to fall back to the same thing. You know, we're trying to pull it back in and reduce the cost. Changes to reimbursement. Is anybody getting reimbursed more now than they were years ago? Probably not. There's tighter restrictions on it, right? There's the XR29 issue, which may or may not apply. I mean, heck, you could change the type of procedure you're doing on the same piece of equipment and fall within that or without it or outside of it. It's just interesting. We have fewer engineers, and we're going to talk a little bit later about fewer engineers. I don't know if as a whole there's fewer engineers, but I can certainly tell you that 10 years ago we were talking about the aging engineer, how they were getting older, and the knowledge of the new engineers is not quite the same as the old, and there's not as many people coming into the field, and we're going to hit on that a little bit. So those fewer engineers have to cover more equipment, right? Which is going to lead us into a discussion on training, and it's all going to tie back together for you. And all of this is tied to increased customer satisfaction. So does anybody do more customer satisfaction surveys today than they did 5 years ago? No? You do less? See, that's a question you got to answer me on. You have to, because you all do more than likely. You're all being asked for better outcomes. So yesterday, maybe not yesterday, sometimes my days are off, a week ago, I was reading that they something about the new healthcare regulation where if you're in for a heart attack or something like that and you come back to the hospital within 30 days, Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody read that? Please.
You don't, if they come back within 30 days for that same illness, the hospital won't get reimbursed.
There you go. So if they come back to the hospital within 30 days, the hospital won't get reimbursed for that patient coming back again. That's crazy, right? Or is it? But, I mean, hopefully we wouldn't come back. But the point is they have to have better outcomes in the first place. You have to have better outcomes in the first place. I mean, that's important. And it all goes, from a service perspective, it's all going back to your equipment. All right? So we've been hearing this forever, right? Nobody gets fired for calling the OEM. Has anybody ever fired anybody for calling the OEM? You don't. Well, you probably don't want to tell me that. If you ever been fired for? No, we won't even ask that. We won't even ask that. Have you ever? Well, yeah, we'll ask it. You know, no, you don't get fired for calling the OEM. Why is that? Anybody? Answer.
They're perceived you can't do any better.
You can't do any better. They can't be wrong, right? It's nothing personal, and the resources behind them are thought to be much deeper, right? Much deeper. The talent pool is thought to be much deeper. It's fair to say. So we had a. That's me. Hang on. Turn that off. Sorry. That's actually a true statement. You know. Last night I was talking to John Garrett. Does anybody know John Garrett? No? He was at that dinner last night. And he said, you know, at his facility, it's like if something happens and it takes him, 2 days or 3 days to fix a problem, then they're questioning his capabilities, and they're saying, well, what's going on here, But if the OEM comes in and takes them a week to fix it, it's like, man, that was a really hard problem. It took them, and he's like, well, what are we, minced meat here? He's been in this industry 20 years or whatever. I mean, it's happened to me too. I mean, me personally, it's been the same thing has happened, I had an incident not too long ago where we called in the OEM for some help, and I mean, it just made me look like I wasn't, real bright, which sometimes I question that, but it happens. It happens. But the truth is that's not the case. It's not the case. And it's a little different environment. Anyway, so no one gets fired for calling the OEM. But does that mean it's necessarily the best choice? No. No. Are they going to be, well, let's by the dollars, are they going to be cheaper? Is it going to be less expensive to call them in? So probably not. Now, if they fix something in a couple hours that was taking you 3 days, that's a different story. That's a different story. And I don't deny that there are one-offs like that. There are. They come in and there was a software thing that you didn't know about, and they knew to look for that, and they found it and fixed it. Props to them, credit. I'm glad they did it, right? But normally, regularly, that's not going to be the case. At least that's my experience.
But sometimes when it gets you, if you take a long time to fix it, you've already done all the troubleshooting. The OEM comes in, you let them know what all you did. They don't have to do it. They go right to the next step and boom, it's fixed.
I did not think of that. That's a fantastic point. That is a fantastic point. So they're basically coming in and you've done all of the pre-work, whoever it is. Now we're using the OEM as an example, but it could be if you're in-house and you're calling in the third party, right? It's the same ladder, so I don't want you to take it as I'm pounding on whoever raised their hands earlier, but it's just the next step up is what I'm saying. And yeah, exactly. You go in and do all of the pre-work, good service engineers anyway, and now they look like geniuses when somebody else fixed it. I mean, I like being that guy. That's okay, If I'm the second guy they call in, I like being that guy. And that's a great way to get business, right? Especially if you are a third party and they're calling or something and they're calling in another third party. It's crazy. All right. So nobody gets fired for doing that, but not always the best option. Sometimes you can save some money and, you can definitely, and training is a big thing that I've seen in this. Here's another thing. What about having people that are doing first call for you, right? This is a, let's make sure, this is a recent story. It's very short, but it's very, very to the point. Somebody had been to training, and I just spoke with their director, and they had an issue with a piece of equipment, and what they said to me is they've been to training, but they don't have any specific experience. I'm going to leave all the details out of that, but the point is these people had been to training and couldn't look at a simple issue that, in my opinion, and probably most people's opinions, should have been looked at by them. So we're going to touch on training in a little bit too, and that falls back on y'all, because when they call in somebody else, that's why they do it, because something like that happened. Does that make sense, or was that too vague? Have to be a little vague on that one. All right, let's talk about some of the advantages. So reducing cost, your response time, downtime, which is a big one. Now, that one goes away if you happen to be a large facility that has somebody in-house all the time, right? You have somebody that's there all the time. And then the knowledge of it all. Those three things right there are big advantages to bringing service in-house, in my opinion. Any others out there that you can think of? I mean, you guys are here because you're either doing this or thinking about doing it, so.
The relationship with the clinical users.
Okay, exactly. That's a great one. So the knowledge here, if I expanded on that, I would definitely put that in there. The experience of what's going on every day in your facility with those technologists, right? You agree with that? Do you gain a little bit of leeway with them too? A lot of times like that. They know you. They know what you're capable of. You know how they're using the equipment. You know, I've seen issues like that many times. You go in and fix a X-ray light field problem, and you leave, and they call you a day later, and they have the problem again. You know, or 2 days later.
Even strategically with that knowledge, you can take a look at the vendor that you can bring to work in-house, and as you negotiate with them for, say, like master agreement on parts discount or labor discount without commitment for volume, the strategy you can take is say, look, if you work it out by your cost of ownership that your product is cheaper to own than XYZ and QRS over here, we can support buying your product all day long. Show me the price, show me the parts, labor discount, if I choose to buy or do price matching. You know, and a lot of vendors, OEMs are doing that now to support the in-house. I've gotten over 70% discount on brand new OEM glass from the OEM.
Oh, that's crazy, right?
If they want to do it, they will.
Yeah, well, that kind of goes back to when they really want the business. It's hard to fight it. But how far are they willing to go to do it, right? Do you have a lot of pieces for that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So the bigger you are, the bigger your base is, the more leverage you have to do that. And I have a slide in here on different types of contracts like that, and for sure that's one. When you talk about bringing it in-house, I mean, you're talking about having them supply you with parts support and maybe some tech support or something. And
phone support, free Class C licenses, free clinical lab support for the user, you know. But again, it goes back to if they know they may lose something, then all of a sudden they start working with you. If they think they're in control, it's a tail wagging the dog. They're going to set the price points.
Which is really frustrating, you know. That's kind of like the airline industry and buying your freaking seat on a plane, you know. I paid $350 to get up here, and somebody else paid $49, and they're sitting right next to me, you know. I mean, I guess it is the way it is, but and
it's knowledge, where to go.
Yeah, exactly.
And what you really have for leverage.
The key is to know the rules and know how to play the game, right? If you know what the rules are, you can know how to play the game. That's a fair statement right there. Knowledge. Okay, so I obviously had some help with these slides. This is our run this morning, sorry. That was Kim. She's not in here now, but she was doing our slide. We went for a run this morning down on the trail. Did anybody go out this morning? Probably not, right? And run? It was hot, let me tell you. It's hot up here this week. I was planning on riding a motorcycle up here this week. We're down in Nashville, and I was going to ride up here and then head over to Cleveland for a few days, and then I was going to drop back down to Nashville. But it's like the hottest week of the year right now, so decided I might hold off on that. But it would have been fun, but it would have been hot. There's that middle of the day where you're just like, oh God, can I just get there? So reduced cost for service as an advantage. So $400 an hour for OEM support, is that an accurate number? Depends on modality, right? Depends on what modality, depends on what manufacturer perhaps, right? And these rates can vary a lot based on manufacturer, based on modality, based on time of day, based on type of contract you have, right? Maybe in that same contract where you're working in a parts discount, you're working in a service discount, an on-demand service discount. Because a big one, for let's say you're bringing something in-house and you don't want to quite lose that support, maybe you can negotiate an on-demand service contract. They're not black and white. I mean, I can hear 5 different ways that you did it, and somebody else can give me 5 different ways that they did the contract. You really have to look at what you have, look at what your resources are, look what you need, and then use that to negotiate, right?
On a PAC system in IT, the ultimate database vendor, whether it's Oracle or Sybase, is much higher than 400. So if you need to call them because you got a corrupted database or whatever,
Yeah,
it's going to cost you.
that's a lot of money. And are they doing that remotely too?
But
Yeah,
ironically,
right.
for IT, you can do the same model for IT and telecom that you do for biomed and imaging of insourcing. You just have to do, if you supply the same tools.
Yeah.
Because I've worked in-house as an IT tech, go run cable, MIL controller, rebuild a PC, rebuild a line printer, program something, then go do a ventilator. So it's also a biomed concurrent.
Right.
So, but you can apply the same tools and get these numbers down
Oh, yeah.
if they think they have competition.
Right. If
The
they're
whole strategy.
only game in town, probably not so much.
Yeah, only game you're screwed.
That brings up another that brings up another thing too. Are you guys all imaging, or do you have biomedical under your belts as well? Both? Both? Is anybody just imaging? Just imaging? Okay. Well, more and more IT, biomed, and imaging, which is a whole nother discussion, are falling under the same roof too, right? Which agreed, you can take the same processes and apply it to any of those. The numbers may change some, and like the biomed thing with all the equipment, that's interesting. I'm gonna look into that some more. Yeah.
We had a 10-year database of about 1.5 million service events. We did the costing model and labor model. That's what popped up when we were trying to set everything for doing the assigned cost of service ratios. We're like, that doesn't fit. Wait a minute.
Yeah. How did that? It turned it up. There was a point where it turned upside down. That's interesting. Yeah. That would make sense, though, right? I mean,
Your AEM program, you kick it all out anyways. And the biomed.
it's I don't do a lot of biomedical equipment. We just don't do a lot of that. But when you think about that, it makes sense. So these hourly rates can change a lot, but the point is they go the top down, right? It's again, it's the same as that first or second slide that we had where we showed you how you want to service this in-house, going from OEM to ISO to in-house, right? Whatever tier you're on. It's the same way here. You're going to find the least expensive way to do it is least expensive, meaning if you have the other resources, if you have the parts availability and you have the training and that, the least expensive way to do it is going to be in-house. And part of that also depends on what you have, right? So if you have 2 CTs in-house, or it may not be worth it to you to get somebody trained up to service those CTs. If you look at them and the cost of service is really low on them, they're low use, they're not breaking much, you haven't spent much money on them, then you got to look at that. But generally speaking, in-house is going to be the least expensive. Is $40 an hour a reasonable number for an imaging engineer? It's low.
Because you want to put in your benefits and everything else.
Okay.
To count.
True. So doing that, you're probably adding another 20-25% to it, right? Yeah, that's a good point. I need to remember that.
There's another thing on that, and you gotta make sure you have control of it. You could have an in-house guy that spends 5 hours on something that ends up getting you up to that $400 OEM, and then you end up having to call you again. So you gotta have a good escalation procedure there when you escalate enough. Because if you already spend 6 hours on it, you'll get the OEM cost.
That's a good point.
Well, and lost
That
revenue.
happens more times than not if you don't get control of it.
Okay, that's a really good point. If the guy spends too long on it and you call in the OEM, you're already paying that cost anyway. That's fair. Yeah.
I'd also add on to that, and I don't know if you're gonna get to it, but to me, the hourly wage is almost negligible compared to the difference in parts, right? I mean, you can get a third-party part for a fraction of what your OEM's gonna give it to you often, you know, not always, but often.
Yeah.
And so, while, yeah, it's important to me, the difference between an ISO, so your ISO and your OEM cost isn't that great, right? The difference of the hourly, but the ISO team is gonna use a third-party part, whereas the OEM is not. That's to me where your savings comes in.
Some OEMs, what they're doing now, just so you're aware, if you push them, they will sell you harvested parts with warranty.
Yeah.
Really?
That's the new twist they're doing.
Yeah, they do. The question in the hospital is, well, we don't want third-party parts in our equipment. We don't want refurbished parts. Wait a minute, your vendors refurbish parts just like the other does, but they don't know that.
So I was going to say, is anybody else having this experience? Are you hearing what he's saying over here? So if the OEM is using, or whoever it is using remanufactured parts or just harvested parts, we'll call it, not necessarily remanufactured. I mean, you would think that you would know it, that you would know that it's not a new part, it's a used part. But secondly, I don't know that I would care because everybody else is using harvested parts, and that's part of the way they're going in there to get the business. So it kind of makes sense to me that the OEM would come along and do that same thing. But you need to know it, is the difference.
Our experience is they are giving us the price in an effort to show their value.
They are giving you the price?
So they're saying we could do a new part for this price, or we could do a refurbished for this, which is making them show a cost savings about to the hospital.
Yeah, well, that sounds fair to me, though.
Two things. We're finding that first on the labor side, so we're an ISO. A lot of these big health systems they have in-house, so they spend, let's call 4 to 6 hours with OEM or our support on the phone. Then they have negotiated deals with GE or Siemens, so those guys will come out, but they won't come after 5, or they won't come on the weekend, or they'll work up until a certain point so they don't finish the job. So by the time we get called in, it's midnight, everyone's pissed off at the hospital, and they've already spent 12 hours trying to fix it before they get to that point. So there's a lot of layers to this now where I don't know that they're saving any money. They're wasting tons of clinical dollars with downtime not getting reimbursed.
Right. So let me see if I heard you right there. You're saying they're using the in-house people for let's just say the first 4 or 5 hours, and then maybe they call in the OEM, and then when they stop at 5 o'clock and they have.
What we're seeing with a lot of the big national, regional health systems that a lot of us know, there are various regions. They have guidelines on here's who you call first.
Mm-hmm.
You have this number of hours, and then you escalate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the in-house guys never know how to fix it. No offense, but they just don't. And then they get to the OEM, and the OEM says, well, we'll take you to a point, but back to your OEM never gets punished. They send a DOA part, so we have to come in and figure out the OEM sent the DOA part. And even though we have a part 15 minutes away,
They won't buy
their
it.
guidelines dictate they have national agreements with GE or whatever, so they have to get a different part. So there's a lot of rework, and I'm not so sure that there's savings at the end of the day with some of these.
Let me comment on what you just said real quick.
Yeah.
The in-house guys never know how to fix it.
You knew that was going to raise some flags here, right? I mean,
That's because they didn't call you. They fixed it and you didn't get a call. So it's kind of like, a
Fair
bad hair transplant. You
Yeah.
don't see a good hair transplant because you don't know it's a good hair
I
transplant.
figured
You
that
don't-
okay. That's legit. I like that. That's
Right,
Good
so
point.
you probably don't see it like 80% of the in-house stuff that's fixed. You only get the calls when they
Let me correct myself. The good in-house guys, they figured out ways to call us, knowing that we'll be there in 15 minutes, or we can give them support.
Right.
But a lot of times they're captive to the process, and they gotta wait till GE says we can't get there for 6 hours. Well, nobody questions GE. If I say that, we're gonna get fired.
You're not gonna get called again.
Right. So it's just a different paradigm.
It is different.
We base some of our escalation on a temperature to customer. We usually say after an hour, you're in between a rock and a hard call tech support. After an hour of that, call the OEM, get them in. But it's all based on the temperature of customer.
Yeah.
Communication there, hey, I'm under an hour, I think I'm close, I'm gonna call tech support, do you have a problem? 2 hour point, check the temperature again. If it's getting up there high, it's time to make a change.
Okay.
And they all always communicate with me on that to make sure, hey, we're doing the right thing.
Any good program, if it's OEM invaded house, in-house, ISO invaded house, it's, to your point, yeah. Communication to the customer, what service line expectation, like I said, fish and cut bait, what point, as long as the customer's in the loop, what's their comfort level?
So a good takeaway from that for people that are just starting to do this is escalation process. Making sure that you have a good escalation process. Yeah.
One other thing on this slide that I see a lot is if you're going to use an ISO, well, really an OEM, depending on your geography, travel charges. So if my facility is a half hour away, if my travel is going to be negligible versus another ISO might be 4 hours or the OEM might be an hour or two. The other thing is the OEMs like to do a lot of expediting fees for parts. So you can see an extra $2,000 on the bill you weren't expecting. Siemens in particular has a call fee.
Right.
So you'll get a $1,500. They might not charge you per hour for phone support, but you're going to get a flat $1,500 or $2,250 or whatever it is nowadays. So these rates, their rates are more competitive than they used to be, but they found different adders and other.
That reminds me of the phone company or something, right? Where you may find a competitive hourly fee, but the charges that go along with renting your car at the airport show that it's not quite as inexpensive as that $30 a day.
It almost makes you think the long game that the OEMs pull is they're hedging their bets that you don't know how to source and do this do in-house or what third parties are available, and that if somebody was paying attention to the billing, it becomes cost prohibitive to go to P&M and they try to force you back.
Yep.
But if you know what you're doing or have contact of ISOs to use or in-house, et cetera, or blended, you negated their strategy.
Yeah, I think we see more and more blended, right? It's probably the overall picture is a lot of blended contracts or blended service. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, they kind of have to do that. I mean, they have to try to adjust to make the money. I don't have a problem with that. You just have to be aware of it and know what's happening, because when you're in the middle, if you are the independent service organization or you're the engineer, the second level engineer on board, you're caught in the middle a lot of times on this. And you said escalation process and you mentioned the temperature of the customer, right? That's another advantage. If you go back a slide and we were talking about knowledge, that's an advantage that you have when you're there too. You do know that customer. You deal with them every day. You can take their temperature really quick, really quick. And an hour to troubleshoot something, a lot of times it's not a lot of time, right? It's not a lot of time. I mean, that's a first look kind of thing. If it's anything significant, of course, if it's detents, locks, power or something, that's not so bad. But anything more than that, that hour or that 2 hours can go by really quick. But that's really good input. It's interesting that they would that escalation process in particular seemed like it was a little out of whack. That they would go from in-house to OEM and then outside. There's, that just doesn't.
These are things that someone in corporate never contemplated that's actually how life is.
Yeah.
I think the in-house guys are just living with the reality, and they're dealing with mad customers, so they're doing the best they can to try to get the system up while not getting fired for going around the process.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of really good engineers that are really good at calling the OEM. I've seen some really, really good resumes that they're really good at calling the OEM in. They have a lot of schools and a lot of practice and everything, but sometimes they have to be forced into it. That's interesting, though. I'm definitely going to take that stuff up. All right, so we've kind of beat that up, and that means that this is pretty generic. And I've just heard 3 or 4 different scenarios. We've all heard 3 or 4 different scenarios that really mix that up a lot. So if you are bringing this in-house and determining what to bring in-house, it's probably really important to have that escalation process ironed out, at least written down and a process in place, because if you don't have a process in place, it's really hard to fix what's wrong. If you have a process in place for whatever it is, and you do it every single time, then when something is wrong, you can find out where it went wrong, you can change that and continue the process, and that way you're going to get better. Is that fair to say? And it doesn't matter if it's service, that's just in general, right? I'm finding that to be the case now, because I was always the guy who just did it the way that I did it and tried to make it work. But now that we have everything written down and processes out, it really does help. It was a learning experience. All right, response time is the second one. So the first one was the cost, and the second one is response time. And response time will reduce your cost. It may not reduce it on every single one, but it'll certainly reduce it on all of the easy problems to fix. And I say easy meaning the things that maybe a guy, you have a guy kind of trained and he can do first call support for you, for example. That helps a lot. So on-site response time can be reduced dramatically from waiting for outside help or bridge the gap before help arrives. So two things here. Reducing the time to get somebody on site makes the customer understand that you have the same the same sense of urgency that they have about the problem. Does that make sense? That's important. They want to feel important, and they should, because the reason you're employed is because their equipment breaks in general, right? So that's important. Well, maybe not y'all, but engineers. So they need to know that their issue is your issue and it's important to you, just like it's important to them. And then the second one there, where we talk about bridging the gap before help arrives, maybe you're not the guy that's going to fix that equipment, but you can do that first look that I'm talking about. So you can go in and look and see if there's power on. You can go in and look and see if a room's not hitting a detent, or you can see if there's an error message on the screen, or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is. I feel that on site, it's always very important to have somebody that can do some sort of first call support, right? I just feel like that's really important.
And if you have to call the OEM while you're waiting on them, you can still continue to troubleshoot. You may fix it before they get there.
Absolutely.
All you're going to pay is a trip charge.
Right. Absolutely. And they may help you. Like, you can call the OEM, and sometimes they're so busy, they're just going to help you and tell you how to fix it. You know, I've seen that happen before too, especially if you're in that service area where this guy's covering, you know, half of Texas and you're on the other half, the other 6 hours away. Those guys are more apt to help you out with what you need. And I've seen them help with service keys and whatever else it may be. They may not tell everybody they're doing it, but they do it.
Relationship with the technicians.
Absolutely.
Not with the company.
Yeah, the engineer.
And they're more helpful near the end of their shift.
Nice. I like it. I like where your head is. Yeah. So remember that. Call at the end of the day, right? Hey, I can't tell you how many people call us for parts at 7 o'clock at night because they know we can get to FedEx by 10. You know what I mean? They wait all day and price everything that they can price and call you at 7 or 8 at night because they know you can get it to FedEx by 10, right? Crazy. That's a good point. But they will help you out on that. At least that's what we've found anyway, especially if they're really busy, you know, and you have a good relationship with them. I mean, hey, everything goes back. It does to some extent go back to relationships. I think we went through a period with some companies where they really wouldn't help you. They wanted a PO to help you. You call them and they want a PO to help you. You know, hard copy PO. That's hard right there. That's even worse. But that they just, and that's when they don't need the business, I guess. You know, or it's just difficult to do. But I'm not finding that so much right now. Does anybody have that issue with anybody?
We do. We have a service contract with GE and Siemens, and if we call outside of the contract, like on the weekend, we have to provide a PO before a service guy will come out.
Wow, that's where are you? Who are you with?
St. Bernard Hospital on the west side of Chicago, Inglewood.
Wow, that's pretty harsh. Do you do any of your service in house?
We do. Most of our equipment is fairly new, so we have extended contracts. We do have Biomed in-house, but they do like the medical, like all the respirators and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't do the bigger piece of equipment like Siemens, our NucMed, our MRI, and all of that. They don't handle those.
So it's common that the biomedical department may service imaging equipment or may not. So that means you don't have an imaging service engineers? It's all outsourced? You guys, there's a lot of opportunity right here. That's what I just heard. I just heard a lot of opportunity over here. In all seriousness, though, I know where you're at. And so your contract is a 9-to-5 contract or something like that, right? So how common is that? You get a new piece of equipment and it comes with a service contract that's good from 9 to 5, right? Well, at that point, do you need to have an engineer on site that can do some kind of support? It probably wouldn't hurt you. I mean,
Technical off-site support, if it's something simple, they can fix it off-site, but if it's something that they need to come in, most of the time they're there. If it's within the business hours of that day, they'll come in. If not, they'll order the part and they'll be the next day to fix it.
yeah, which I guess is okay if it's not an urgent piece of equipment for you. But I mean, you'll find in that case that, yeah, exactly. You'll find in that case that, so you're at that tier where you're in-house and you're using the OEM, right? That's where you're at. So from there, there's a lot of resources available to you. You know, a lot of them, I'll be honest, probably here at this conference, that you can tap into to get some help either in that time that you're not under contract, or maybe as those contracts expire, or, you know, it would be good to use that as a negotiating tool. So once your contracts are coming up, you're a few years old on your equipment or whatever, that's a good time when you renegotiate for those extra hours that you know you're going to need, because you've been looking at what you spent over the last 3 years and you spent all this money after hours, right? And can you get a contract that goes 24 hours? Yeah, you just got to pay for it, right? You're going to have to pay for it, that's all. You know, so, and I can't determine whether you need to have a 24-hour OEM contract or not, but you might. Or you might have another.
And the imaging side, the OEM, they'll sell you an 8 to 5 contract on, say, a CP. Or an MRI is a good example. 9 out of 10 times, you're not gonna have a hard time down during the day, so they gotta come out after hours. They're gonna charge you overtime. I've renegotiated an MRI contract from 5 in the afternoon till 7 the next morning. They don't like it, but they'll do it.
Sure.
Because what a lot of the OEMs are running into, if they're doing their cutbacks, is on certain modalities like CTMR, they will do best effort after midnight, even if you say like you're an 8 to 9 contract, best effort after midnight, but they won't guarantee. So between your wishing hour, between midnight and 7, it's a crapshoot if you're going to get a guy to show up or not. MRCT, you have the best chance, usually it's CT. Cath lab, forget about it. General X-ray, forget about it. It's not going to happen. They won't stand for it. And some of the
It's all
OEMs.
regional. It's those issues are regional.
Well, that's what we see in Chicago here.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
took away the weekend service for on-call for some of
Right.
the general modalities, and
So
we have
we're-
like 400 clinics.
Took away completely, meaning it's not available?
Yeah, you can't call them up. There's no one to call.
Yeah, we're seeing that in the southeast where what they're doing is they're combining modalities, right? So now you work, instead of just doing cath lab, you do cath lab and CT. You got OEM people that are quitting because they're overworked. And so it's really shrinking to where you can't even get, like you said, you can't get midnight coverage from the OEMs because they say they only have one person on call or they don't
Yeah.
have anyone on call. And it's starting to get a little shady down there. And then you call the manager, the Siemens manager or the Philips manager, and they say, oh, we're hiring somebody, we're going to fix this problem within the next 6 months or 3 months or whatever. But that's definitely been an issue. So a lot of people are not being able to guarantee that their service during those off hours.
You also have a lot of, the OEMs are going to more of a generalist model.
Yeah.
So, they're hiring younger or less experienced, and they want some really smart people at central command pulling the strings, but they don't want to pay a bunch of really smart, really experienced guys that kind of money because, like you said, they're cutting back. So you've got a lot of newbies out there that know how to look at a screen, call home.
Well,
But if that's your model, you can't do 2 a.m.
Right, so some of the funny things, I just went through negotiations of big on GE, is that they were trying to do a pitch for revamping an agreement when we were blowing it up. They go, well, you have all these specialized guys, we'll train you guys to have all these specialists. They go, are you doing this? Well, no. Well, why the hell would I do this? Because they saw the same limitations.
Yeah.
When they had all their eggs in one basket and it wasn't working for them. So that's why as an house guy, why would I go to a defective model?
well, I mean, for forever, most of the time, if we're not with the OEM, our service engineers had to service more than one modality, right? Generally speaking, maybe not CT, but it's common. So to me, on the other side of that is it makes sense for the OEM to have their guys service more than one modality as well. That makes sense, right? But you just have to have more people to do it, is what it amounts to, right?
A lot of times is when you get an ultrasound guy that's supposed to come in, you place a call for an X-ray room. The ultrasound guy goes to check the X-ray, so they kind of cross you in.
Yeah, that can be. I mean, I've been there when somebody comes in and sets up a computer, and plugs it in and opens up a book and then picks up their phone and calls somebody and they walk them through it. I mean, if they fix it, I'm probably okay with that, to be honest with you, as long as they can fix it when they do it. The problem is a lot of times they can't. So.
And then it becomes phone calls. So I have this, when we're talking about specialties and modalities, I have a guy, so GE, right? I've got a guy that focuses on ultrasound. The cysto room goes down. He comes in for 3 days working on the cysto room. The cysto guy is on leave, on vacation for a week. So he spends 3 or 4 days on the cysto room. Cysto guy comes back, fixes it in a day. Now I'm paying that $400, $500 an hour for the 3 days that the non-specialist from the OEM worked on and kept me down.
That's a fair argument. So for you all that are ISOs in here, if you go out and work on a piece of equipment and you don't fix it, do you bill for that? And if you do bill for it, do you actually get paid for it? I'm just curious.
We're regional, so if I can make an enemy, I made 10 because they don't.
So it's a little harder for us to go out and bill for something if we don't fix it, right? That's a tough problem to have. You can't do that. That is a privilege of being with an OEM, I believe. It's a privilege of being with them. They can do that, it seems.
Well, the other problem with when you're coming up with general person that's diagnosing, and it goes to this point about the cost savings on parts versus parts. The generalist will find out, suddenly you're replacing a detector on an ammo, and that's really not the problem. You're a perfectly fine detector. You're spending thousands of dollars on that. You replace it, and you're back to square one again when they didn't get down to the root cause. They just called in, found out this is this code, so they replace this part. So you're throwing parts at it and it's solving the problem.
Yeah. Oh, I can't tell you how many times we send out 2 or 3 parts specifically for CT, and they'll put them all on and they're done. If it's up and running, they're done. They're not going to take one of those off, and frankly, I don't blame them. If it's during the day, they're losing the time the system's down as opposed to being up and running. But
his point on putting an expensive part on and not answering, there are a lot of third-party parts people who have service engineers that will help you, that if they diagnose it, so if I call and say I need a detector, they give me a detector and it doesn't work, well, I might be paying a restocking fee. But if I call them and say, hey, this is my symptom, what do you think we need? When they say you need, and say TriImage says, well, you need a detector, and I put in a detector and it doesn't fix it, there's no restocking.
That's absolutely true. No, it's absolutely true with us too, yeah. You can use this for an example. It's a shameless plug. I'll take it. Yeah. No, it's true. And it should be that way. It should be that way.
I've had manufacturers like Philips where they wouldn't give any phone support. They go, I'm not going to tell you what the part is or the part number for the problem. Why not? Well, because you're not going to order from us. Okay.
Yeah, that is true. Hey, that's a good point to having a good relationship with a parts provider or whatever, right? They can, if that relationship is good, they can send you a few parts, and maybe you can get it up a little bit quicker, and you don't have to escalate to that next spot. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that either. But I mean, there's many times we'll say, hey, if you use one of these parts, there's no restock on them, right? That's fair. I mean, hey, I think I need one of these 3 boards because your guys in-house or your guys out there or whoever, they're under pressure to get it fixed too. So, and since we're all kind of working towards that goal, that makes sense. But if they're doing that and charging you for it, find somebody else. All right? And if that's you, think about that. All right. So no waiting on someone to look at basic issues. I think we got that, which could be operator related, which are sometimes And depending on modality, I can tell you which modalities tend to have more operator-related issues as opposed to others. All right, so the knowledge is power. You get familiarity with the systems, which is what we talked about earlier. You get to build a rapport with the technologist, right? That's a big one. Building a rapport with the technologist and the department as a whole. That buys you some time. That buys you, that can buy you some credibility if you're right, you know. OJT to some extent. So you have somebody in there doing first call for you. He hasn't really been trained yet, but he's got somebody that gives him good tech support. He's got an hour. You know you're going to bring this piece of equipment in-house. You know you're going to send him to training on it. Right now he has OJT, and if he has somebody to help him with tech support, he might be able to knock it out in an hour or two, and you're good to go. At least the easy things. So you can begin to build your support network. Everybody out there, when you're bringing equipment in-house, you need to have a support network for it, right? Especially tech support helps a lot. Helps a lot. It's an odd-looking slide. Challenges. So those are some of the advantages, some of the challenges to bringing it in-house, and this is kind of getting more to what you might, more into the meat of what you're going to bring in-house first. Talent, parts, training, and support are all issues when you're considering what modalities and manufacturers to bring in-house. This is like the meat of it right here. All right, so now you've done a cost of service and you think that it's going to be feasible based on the cost of training, the cost of the engineer, the part support. This is really the meat of what is going to help you determine that, whether it's realistic. So the first one I have is retiring engineers. All right. That's a dancing bear. It looks like he's playing with a Pokemon thing. So you're retiring engineers. Here's what I've found, and we'll see if you agree. The skill sets of your new engineers are not the same in general as the skill sets of your older engineers. Older meaning more experienced, right? I'm older, more experienced. They have a different skill set. But the technology, or the way that we're troubleshooting and the things that they're doing are different now too, right? So they don't necessarily need to have those same skill sets. But these guys that are retiring, they have to be able to pass it on. So you need to get these young new guys coming in and let them work with these experienced engineers for a while. Because engineers are getting harder to come by. Does anybody have no problem hiring an engineer? Is there anybody who it's no problem? Every time they want one, they just go get it, right? It's not that easy. I mean, it's just not that easy anymore. And I would say somebody that's talking to them needs to really know what they're talking about. It takes 5 or 6 questions, you know, to really understand it, or to know if they really know specifically what you're talking to them about. It doesn't take a lot of questions. Yes?
That is kind of where my question goes is, when you hire someone that is trained as an engineer, mechanical, electrical, whatever, but they've not worked in imaging, or they've not worked in, you know, the medical equipment world, how long should they shadow someone with experience before you should send them out on their own? Is there any kind of
So is this a DeVry graduate or what's that other school? There's another one out there in Texas. Anybody know which one that? ITT Tech, that is one, yeah. And DeVry ITT and Brown Mackie College, Texas State Technical College, yeah. ECPI.
Speak to that type of graduate versus like a full-fledged like bachelor's degree or something like that. Are they different?
Well, they are different, yes. I would definitely.
They are as a
So,
technologist.
yeah.
They're different too.
Well, they are different degrees. They are different degrees, and they're probably a little different skill sets too. Like somebody that goes to a DeVry or for a tech, as opposed to say a Brown Mackie College or something like that. I just recently hired somebody from Brown Mackie in Texas. You guys ever heard of that? It's Brown Mackie. I just recently hired a guy, an entry-level X-ray guy from there, and he's doing. So in our facility, you know, we have like all the bays set up, so they test parts in them, and they, you know, we train in them, and he just keeps them running in that. This guy came out of there, and he hit the ground running. And he really doesn't know X-ray, but his electronics is really good, you know. And there's a skill set. For me, the skill set is when you sit there and you talk to somebody and they understand, like they work on their own car maybe. You know, they understand how to relate putting the wheels on their skateboard to something they're doing in our field. They may not understand X-ray physics at this point, but they know a set of wrenches. They understand to some degree pneumatics. You know, they know that when they change the air filter in their car, and you can take all of that kind of learning and apply it to whatever the situation is. That's the guy that I find, for me personally, that I'm going to have up and running really quick.
And to expand on that, talk about bachelor's degree.
Yeah, I don't-
You know, to me, you need for us to hire you, you have to have an associate's in electronics at least.
Okay.
Or military experience. And we find like Navy guys, weapon systems guys from the Navy.
Yeah.
You know, some Army guys have some electronics. That military is really,
Yeah.
you know, really where it's at. I can't believe how many people I have at work when they are ex-Navy, working on radar systems, stuff like that.
Those
Yeah.
are good linear accelerator guys.
Right.
I like that. So I don't really know that that's still true is what you're telling me. So I happen to be ex-Navy electronics. Thank you. Thank you. Really glad you said that. Big smile on my face. But I do believe that to be true too. I mean, the military training is just really good in electronics. They've been doing it a long time. They're really good at it. It's a long school. A lot of people fail and drop out of it. So the guys that get through it know what they're doing. That's fair to say. What I don't want to do is say this degree from here is better than that degree from there. So I think that if I know, I'm just trying to answer it without.
I'm thinking, because you answer your question, part of it goes back to, like, say somebody's into a new role, they're doing some different background. Like, I'll hire biomeds in imaging, I train them up in imaging.
Sure.
Really, before you turn them loose, is demonstrated competency. So shadowing with them, observation, they know what to touch, what not to touch, what they should be checking, what standards they should measure into, or what's applicable, relevant. You know, they say, okay, yeah, I trust this guy. Versus, you know, and then you can do more hand-holding and babysitting. You know, because I've seen a lot of guys in the industry come in. I used to have in Iowa guys that were from the oil industry, mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
We would cross-train. They could do the mechanical piece, but then you have to go and explain the why. This is why you're checking this on the biomedical function. This is why the importance of the safety interlocks on this, et cetera, et cetera. Or why don't touch this over here, or take your tools off when you go in the MRI room. You know, we have to teach them the why piece because they can do the technical, but they won't know the rest. And then you get into the subtleties of the clinical ramifications and knowing the customer, what's driving them, their stressors.
Yeah, customer support skills are. I mean, for years Manny's been teaching a course on customer service for as long as I can remember, you know, and it's still hard for people to get that, especially engineers, because engineers don't think quite the same all the time. But I don't know, the skill sets I expect them to have the education if they have a 2-year degree. I expect them to have that. You can test that almost on paper, but it's all those other competencies that are really hard to find at least I struggle finding those in an individual. So, and that kind of takes us to skill sets and the value of that engineer as well. And when I say value, you know, you could almost put a dollar sign to that too, right? It's really easy to hire somebody and not keep him because you're not paying him, and it's really easy to overpay somebody and be stuck with that too, I guess is what I would leave that at. Any other comments on that? Good points. Yeah, please.
John, one question I had is actually as a biomed shop looking to bring imaging on as a new department, staffing is also an issue too. I've seen a lot of biomed shops try to bring one imaging guy on, and it's possible, it's not desired because, I mean, that one imaging guy can't be on call 24/7. And your other biomed department's not going to be able to specialize. They're not going to be able to provide that same type of troubleshooting that he does. So as far as staffing, you know, having to hire 2 imaging at one time and making sure you staff up to the specialties that you're taking on.
So is it a dollars per engineer that you use now for that? You know how much value of equipment per engineer? Do you expect an engineer to be able to service $1 million worth of equipment?
It's one factor. I mean, I've looked at it over the years. It's one piece. It's number of transactions per day, per week, number of after hours. The whole problem when you do imaging staffing, say if you're building a program, for example, is imaging is feast and famine from biomed. Biomed, you're doing one of many. Imaging, you're doing a lot of one-of-ones. The visibility of the imaging is higher. Doing imaging is like when you take over lab analyzers in-house. Same level of visibility, administration, somebody yelling at you. That's how you have to really look at it. So for example, say you were building, like a recommendation I would give to you, I would say you hire, depending on how many systems you have, look at the labor requirements, PM, CM, approximate, account for downtime. That guy's gonna be twiddling his thumbs, he's gonna be a Maytag repairman. Your best bet is what's the lesser of evils, get one guy, do screening training on your other biomeds, do first look for the on-call piece, do your coordination of the vendor, get your numbers, see what your cost run rates are, et cetera, your opportunities, then build your argument for number two. And start stepping like that. Strategically, that'd be the best way of doing it. That way you don't overhire and try to get stuff in place, or you get administration sweating you. Because you get these guys, where's those savings? Hold on.
Can I ask
Okay.
a question?
Yeah, sure.
So is it a community hospital or is it a larger facility?
It's Rush University. We're actually Rush Copley University, which just became brother to Rush University.
That's
How many beds is that? How many beds are you talking?
Our bed is 250. So
Small. What do you about 3, 4 biomeds and one imaging guy projected?
right now, 3 biomeds, 1 coordinator.
Okay, and then are you just tied to Main Rush? I can't remember.
We are brother to Main Rush.
Brother, but aren't they Siemens or multi-vendor? I apologize for that.
Yeah. We'll
Siemens.
segue.
Okay. If a field model might be the better solution to control cost, depending, if you can't do it on your own, so to speak, depending what kind of autonomy you're allowed to have.
So I guess the answer is it's not a direct answer, right? I mean, the answer is it's a little bit, definitely a little, yeah.
Every scenario is different,
Yeah.
community versus academic.
And you're not going to take all of that at once. So it's probably easier if you're hiring one engineer to determine what it is that you're going to service and start with that. And then from there you can tackle more.
That's the mistake I've seen made. They tried to bring on one imaging tech. They send them off to cath lab, CERM training. They don't realize the commitment that cath lab is.
Yeah.
So it's better to stick to general imaging.
Yeah, it might be, or yeah, definitely. Especially if you want to get his feet wet, something that doesn't have so much downtime would be good too, right? Yeah, the importance of it, yeah. Something that's not such a high priority on the list. I mean, you can send somebody
start
to.
on because doctors
Yeah.
touch it, right? So
Yeah.
CT, MR, you're dealing with technology.
Exactly.
Doctors are touching cath. That's a dangerous thing to start on. You want to have a developed program before you start taking cath labs over, right? It's trusted.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a fantastic point. Stay the farthest away from them as you can to begin with. Yeah, cath is. I mean, I like cath, but that's a. We were just talking about that too, like that, how tight that little group is that works in a cath lab, and they aren't really quick to accept somebody to come in from the outside in that group. So that's really a hard place for somebody to start, especially somebody that isn't like really confident and qualified to do that.
Your CT technologist is mad, you might get a phone call. If your cardiologist is mad, you gotta go see somebody.
Right.
You know?
Good. Exactly. So fair.
We had the opposite experiences. That's what actually we dove into imaging is by starting with the cath lab.
Really?
Primarily because the director trusted us and we wanted to build some credibility with radiology by showing them we support that area. We invested quite a bit into our engineer.
Yeah, I could see. Was he an engineer that was an imaging guy already?
He was actually, he wasn't. We actually trained him through RSDI all the way up to sending him to Germany for Siemens and to Cleveland for Philips OEM training.
All right.
And the most important part of it is actually the customer service aspect of it. Being able to show to the physicians that he's capable of doing it.
Well, so he had a director that wanted to go that direction, but which is I mean, it can be that way, but I'm glad it worked out, but it's a hard way to start, but it worked. So that's nothing wrong with that. Wow. And there's a lot of savings to be had there by doing that too, by the way.
But, you know, we're starting to offset. I mean, we put quite a bit of money to get him trained with Siemens and with Philips and just sending him to Germany and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We reduced the contracts to support level. Is it all support level? No, support level.
Part of that is part of this slide right here, right? Where to purchase parts and things. It determines what you want to do that on too. I'm just to keep moving. That's a little bit crazy, but I'm glad that it worked out so good. I mean, it's crazy. I'd like to know who that was. Who's the engineer? No, not for that reason. I'm just no. No, did not mean that. All right, where to purchase parts. So OEMs or aftermarket, this is going to influence that decision too. So, you know, let me just use an example. If you're doing GECT, you can get aftermarket parts everywhere. It's easy to get them, right? It's not a hard pill to swallow right there. There's a lot of people that do it. So the more people that do it, the more available the parts are, the better your pricing is going to be, the more savings you're going to see by doing that. All right? You're going to have to weigh that with modality with experience of the engineer too, though. Like, I know a lot of CT engineers that don't understand X-ray, okay? They do not understand X-ray. They know how to run the console on a CT, and they know how to replace parts on a CT, and they don't really understand X-ray, but they're really good CT engineers, you know? So you might need a little different skill set for that. Know your vendors. There's plenty of quality aftermarket parts providers. Some of them are right here in the room, I'm sure. So some focus on certain modalities, manufacturers, specialties. You know, that's part of why you're here at this show. Is that fair to say? That's fair to say. Is CT fairly easy to bring in-house? Depends on the manufacturer, right? What's the most important piece of a CT to understand if you're bringing it in-house? Anybody? Tube, right? It's all about the tube. So a direct thought about that is, yeah.
One of the things on CT, especially if you do GE, for example, Dunley's one of the big providers. Plug for them.
Yeah, that was a plug for them.
GE will tell you on their older product where Dunley has all the tubes for them. They'll say, well, if you buy a non-GE tube, it won't work with Acer, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Dunley and GE actually worked out there was a legal document available that Dunley will share with you, where GE agreed that they will reactivate Acer on the product just for a regular hourly rate P&M charge, and you can use that Dunley tube. There's no issue, because when push comes to shove, for example, GE, they'll say that they can't warrant or guarantee the output of that tube, yada, 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 for dose management, dosing the patient, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. Then you flip it around on it and you say, well, there's studies by AAPM, former chairman, and studies by Canada, peer-reviewed medical studies, that there is no difference between a Dunley tube and a GE tube. And you can also make GE acknowledge there is no published study by GE, external or internal to them, that says there is a difference.
Yeah, a lot of it's perception, right? You can say whatever you want until somebody goes and fights it. You're not going to know any difference until you challenge it, for sure. There's a lot of systems running out there right now that come up with a screen that tells you they can't guarantee. Establish an approval process. So what we're talking about here, what I'm saying is make sure that you have a process for buying the parts from the providers that you're going to let your engineers buy parts from. Don't just let them go willy-nilly and buy from anybody willy-nilly. I haven't heard that in a while, have you? Let them buy from anywhere they want. Make sure that your suppliers are vetted and that you know their processes, and basically you know that you're getting a good product. Because when you don't, and that system is down because the parts that came in were bad, guess what they're going to say? Had I gone with the OEM, or whoever is the next one above, whoever's servicing it, in that chart we started earlier, you'd be okay. Keep that in mind. Training. Know your training options. All right? So a lot of times I heard already in this room that you're by a contract, some sort of contract, and you can get training from the OEM, right? Perfect. If you can get it, take it. As a matter of fact, if you can negotiate that into your buying process, that's a beautiful thing. Right? You buy a new piece of equipment, negotiate the training into it, because after that is after that. If it's negotiated into the purchase, you're going to get the training. All right? That's OEM training. Find out who offers aftermarket training. There's a few of us out there that offer aftermarket training. check it out. It's good training. Make sure it provides you with what you're going to need to service that equipment. Now, and we're not talking about just providing training so that you can buy parts from that. We're talking about providing training that enables your people to be able to service the equipment they're going training on. And I know that it can be different, so just keep that in mind. Create a model to understand your ROI. And this is just as it relates to training. Really, it's a no-brainer on this one, okay? If you send somebody to get trained on something and they pull 1 or 2 PMs on the equipment, they've probably already paid for whatever your training cost is going to be. This is really you don't even have to think about it. It doesn't take long. So if they do 2 PMs a year, that's, you paid for that in a year. That doesn't even count anything else that you've put in there, any service calls they've done. Does it allow you to remove the contract and do the work yourself? You want it to do that. Like I gave you an example earlier in this discussion, of somebody that had been to training for a number of weeks, and the call that I got said, he's been to training, but it's not specific. So that goes back to that well-rounded thing as well, right? Well, you've learned all about that, but maybe not on that specific model. Ask for what you need. If you don't see what you need out there as far as training goes, ask somebody. Most people, they can figure out how to customize something for you. All right? Or where you'll fit in on it. Yes?
So there's a lot of brains in this room, and I was hoping to get some of your opinions on this. A challenge that I'm seeing for bringing in-house, because I'm bringing in a lot of in-house, we have a lot of in-house equipment. But one of my concerns, and you brought it up when you're talking about purchasing a piece of equipment and getting education at a time, is to also negotiate maybe not your software level, but at least your OS. Okay, because now there's a class later about cybersecurity, right? So your unit's running on XP. Windows 7 is only going to be operating for the next 4 years. Is that something that anybody is starting to negotiate with new purchases on saying, yes, you don't have to keep me up on the level of software for the actual equipment, but you have to keep me up on the operating software so that my network is still secure? That's a concern of mine on bringing equipment in-house from...
That's a great question.
That's something I really came here to learn about. So if anybody's got something on that, sorry.
No, that's a great question. We think of software levels all the time, but not operating system. Yeah.
One of the things you can do, and some of the OEMs, I'm trying to work with them right now on it, is they do like the software agreement, et cetera, and they want to charge you arm and leg, and they only give you
Evolve or something.
Well, Siemens that. What I'm pushing with a couple of them is a software update agreement, no labor included. And then a hardware obsolescence for the box in case I have to capitalize the stupid box.
Okay.
No labor. That way, so during the term of whatever, 3-year, 5-year, instead of paying like $8,000 for the workstation, I pay $1,200.
Okay.
And I get that. And
So
then now
you're
it's
just paying for the hardware.
well, hardware replacement tied with the software, so I get the operating system and the application way cheaper than just a conventional, traditional software.
What kind of verbiage are you using to do that?
I'm still working it out with them, basically.
I'll be here another day. I'll talk.
So yeah, that might be a good side conversation there. But it is a really good point to consider, and honestly, I hadn't. Operating systems over rev levels of software. Especially if you're coming to a changeover from, like you're saying, to XP to 7 or something like that. That's an interesting question.
The 7s that you're buying now
Are going to be obsolete.
are
Yeah.
going to be obsolete in 4 years, right? So you're going to have to go through that too.
Yeah. But if you do get a copy of your software from the vendor, so you can do perpetual backups, your hard drives are off the shelf, segment your network for security purposes,
Yeah.
say for about antivirus, you can go another 20 years to maintain it, you just keep reinstalling the same OS.
If that software were installed on the new operating system. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you do a backup of your existing, and you just ad nauseum, you just keep re-imaging it. So if you crash or anything like that, you can maintain it from a supportability standpoint.
So it's not. He's talking about not upgrading. Yeah, that's talking about not upgrading right there. Yeah, that's what he's saying. You want a way to do that. I get what you're saying too. That's a way of getting around having to do it. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so is this where there we go. Another support, on support side of things, don't be afraid to ask for help. You're talking about bringing things in-house here, and you haven't done that before. Don't be afraid to go out and ask people for help, and ask for the kinds of support that you may not even know exactly what it is you're asking for yet, or what you need, but don't be afraid to go out and ask these different vendors or other, your peers, for that kind of help. Don't be afraid to do that, because there's a lot of different scenarios, as you've heard in here today, and there's a lot of different routes that you can take. And a number of them can be right. There's not one right way to do this, right? Don't know how to replace or repair. This is just saying partially you can use other OEMs or other ISOs for that help, that type of help. Time and materials contracts, we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, using that to help you transition into servicing in-house. You may want to bring it all in, but you bring it one at a time. And we already kind of discussed researching your providers, so go past that. So there's two approaches to this. There's one is dipping a toe, which we've discussed, and the other one is going all in, okay? And I've seen it go both ways. Not one's right and one's wrong. The first thing is analyze your install base. I totally made up these percentages of numbers, so don't knock me on this, but look at the equipment that you have and see how many of what you have. And this will also help you determine your engineers, right? I mean, just look and see. You may have 20% ultrasound, 20% mobile units or something, and just look at it. And after you do that, you're going to analyze your cost of service for each one of those. And for a guy to get his feet wet, when I started in mammography, which seems like a modality that may be a difficult one to start in. Honestly, it's fantastic. Everything's in one bucket. It's all right in front of you. The rules that you have to follow to make it compliant are in stone. They're black and white. There's not a lot of gray area in there. You got to pass this test. You have to see this resolution. You have to do that. For my mind and an engineer who is a logical person, that's easy to follow. It's a lot harder than getting into a cath lab and the guy saying, man, my images look like terrible. Well, now you have to interpret, what does he mean by terrible? And this doc may mean something different than the other one by terrible. So my opinion, go with something that's black and white to get started. That helps a lot. And all in one package. A cath lab or RNF rooms can be a little intimidating if you got a bunch of cabinets or, so C-arms, mobiles, mammos. They may not be your biggest bang for the buck in the beginning, but they're a good way to get somebody's feet wet. A little less pressure in those situations. So if you're going to go all at risk, develop your game plan and analyze your install place. You get this game plan? Anybody get that? That was a movie. I probably had that thrown in on me too. Determine which contracts that you need to keep, move, or cancel. So we're not saying if you're going to go all at risk that you're really going to go all at risk tomorrow. That's just the goal. There may be some contracts where you go from a full OEM contract to a parts support or a tech support, or maybe you go to an insurance plan. There's a lot of crossovers here, but you don't necessarily have to drop them all at once. You can look at these different types of options you have up there, assist with the OEM, ISO assistance, and so on. Insurance model, we see a lot of insurance model out there too, right? Which is a little tougher one. What is available in the aftermarket to support your decision? So yeah, you've decided that you're taking a guy off, he's going to do mammal and mobiles. Now you better go find some support, right? Find out who can help you with that. There's a bunch of good people that can help you with whatever it is. You just have to find them ahead of time. Service support, technical support, parts and glass, that makes sense. Kind of hits on our last slide. So what are you trying to do when you're bringing it in-house? Are you just trying to save money? Are you trying to have better uptime, which in the end saves money? Determine why you're doing what you're doing. You're not just going to do it for the heck of it. Determine what you're trying to achieve, because if you don't determine what you're trying to achieve, you cannot determine whether you were successful or not. Right? You have to be able to benchmark that. When you talk about hiring engineers, depending on what you're doing, there's a few ways. You can get an experienced guy who knows it all. He's going to be more expensive. You can get a less experienced guy. Maybe he's an X-ray engineer, but he doesn't know your specific system, Or you can get an inexperienced guy, and like he said, he sent his guy through all of the training classes, and then he went to C-arm classes and then he went to the OEM. What I find with that is if you do all of that training at once, it can be a little overwhelming on a guy. You know, and I think that 80-20 rule, they only remember 20% of what they're, the 80%, I don't know what that's all about. It's more like a 20% rule. They remember 20% of what they get taught in class, you know. So for that, you have to have good support. If you have a guy who always calls in the OEM, or not the OEM, but some kind of support, and really what he's doing is managing contracts for you, and you're trying to bring it in-house, and you hired him because he had all this experience, find another guy. I know you're not going to hear that in many places, but I'm telling you, find another guy. He's the wrong guy, you know. I know. What about service keys? That's always a question that comes up. That's another contract that you could look at, a service contract for keys. And on a lot of systems, you don't need them. Some systems you do. Call us. Ask some of these other suppliers what you really need to have that on.
And those keys,
Yeah.
pricing is all negotiable.
It's all negotiable. Agreed. It's all negotiable. Yeah. Sometimes I have a hard time with certain ones, but generally speaking, even Siemens, I'll use that as an example. I call up Siemens because I need to install a tube on a cath lab. They give me the key, or the customer the key to do that. You know, but you don't, if you don't know that and you haven't asked around, then you assume that you can't do it. It's not like that. I think we're close. We already talked about if you do, so that was all at risk. If you do managed risk, you're looking at the same thing, is what I'm trying to say here. You still have to develop a game plan, decide what the modalities are going to be, you know, find out who your partnerships are, and take it from there. Fair to say. So, to be successful, you must empower your engineer. All right? That is your most valuable resource. He's going to be on the front line. He's going to be dealing with the end user, so he's interfacing with the customer. He's the first one that shows up when they're upset. You know, we say at our company, empowering the engineer, that's our slogan, and we mean it. That's what we need to do, and that's probably what you guys should be doing too, I hope. Make that engineer, put him in a position where they can be successful, is what I would say, and let them go at it. Let them be successful. All right? This was back to the start, and you know, I think we answered most of these, but what modalities give the biggest bang for the buck is something that you have to analyze. I can't tell you what that is. I can tell you it's easy. CT is easy to make money on doing in-house as long as you have the glassware available, for sure. I can tell you that, but there's just more that goes into that decision than just, yeah, we can get a tube for it, right? Fair enough. All right, so thank you. Are there any questions? Have any concerns? Hey, I really appreciate you guys.